Johnny, what's going on? What do you got for me?
Abe Lincoln would have loved a podcast about Hallmark Christmas movies.
What the hell are you talking about? Well, if there was such a thing.
Oh, there is one.
How to Be Abe Lincoln, based on the book by Jonathan Shapiro. And now here are your hosts, Jonathan Shapiro and Greg Grunberg.
This is a dream come true.
Sitting here with me?
Nope, not even close. Do you listen or watch the Deck the Hallmark podcast?
I have heard of it. It's wildly popular, and now I guess I have to listen to it. You're forcing me now.
I write a book called How to Be Abe Lincoln.
Yeah.
7 Steps Toward a Legendary Life, for the express purpose of doing a podcast only so that I can have these guys on. Because I've been on their podcast for the entire 27 years that it's been on the air. I've not enjoyed it once. They make me, and this is true, Hallmark, under the federal government's laws, has to do a Jewish-themed movie once a year during Christmas.
Right.
And it's inevitably Canadian-produced with Gentile actors playing Jews with fake noses, and they make me review that movie.
Right.
So when I wrote about Abe Lincoln,
who
I think is the greatest living or dead American, it occurs to me that I'm going to have these guys on because they're from South Carolina.
Oh, I love it.
Who, along with always being on the wrong side of every issue, was on the wrong side of history in that particular conflict.
Hey, we weren't around yet.
You could call us the most likely to secede.
You see, this is why they're popular with people.
Introduce your friends, please.
They don't try to impress.
Right.
They don't. Guys, could you introduce yourselves? Because I never learned the last names.
Yeah. You want to hear our last names? My name is Brandon Gray. I go by Bran because Brandon's a little too complicated.
Yeah. And my name is Daniel Thompson. I go by Dan because I hate it, and Bran called me it on the first episode. And I'm stuck now. And we're episode 1000 is airing October 20th. Wow. Episode 1000.
Wow.
And I've had to be called Dan for all 1,000 episodes.
So let me
1,000 episodes over how many years?
5 years.
5 years, yeah.
So this is the craziest thing ever, and it's also the greatest thing ever, and it's very Lincoln-esque, because Lincoln is the only U.S. president who has a patent. We've had brilliant presidents. Jefferson was brilliant, no question about it. Abe Lincoln is the only president to have ever obtained a patent.
For the hat?
Not everything has to be funny. You can just listen to what I'm saying.
No, that was a real question, but thanks for insulting me.
Yeah, Lincoln did top hats. Nobody did those.
No one knew
Lincoln.
that. I mean, it just didn't exist.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is fun.
See? Bran and Dan are on my side.
I wonder if Dan would still be willing to co-host. Anyway, the point is, Abe Lincoln got a patent for an incredibly complicated system of that would have allowed river keepers to move steamboats that had run aground. I mean, a very serious piece of work. These guys were equally innovative, and we all watched Hallmark movies and made fun of them. My daughter and I bonded over our love of watching and criticizing Hallmark movies. Mm-hmm. These two, and I say this with complete love and admiration, these two idiots from Southville, South Carolina, or wherever the hell they're from, decide, let's monetize it. And by the way, Jews get a bum rap. These guys decide they'll do a podcast where they review Hallmark movies.
I love it. I've been in a couple.
But this is how Gentile they are.
Yeah.
2 of the guys are named Bran. Right?
Right.
What?
Wasn't there another Bran?
No.
There was another Dan.
Brian.
Well,
and
yeah.
Brian. One
But
Right. There was a guy named Brian. But the way they speak, I thought, I still think they're both named Bran. Because that's how they pronounce Brian. Anyway, they create this podcast.
Yeah.
It becomes so big, they're on the Today Show countless times. They have book deals. They have calendars. They have socks that you can buy. They have merch, right? They've got that Children of the Corn doll that's between them that they sell. These guys have made a living out of this. They've created this thing which I think has been copied, and I've had the pleasure of being on it a number of times.
That's awesome.
And that is something Lincoln would have done. Lincoln saw a problem, saw a need, and filled it.
And you're a Lincoln expert, you said? You've also, Dan,
I would not claim the Jonathan Shapiro level of Lincoln expert. I've taught college level history to high school students for 16 years. All of it United States history. So advanced placement United States history. I still teach it now. I go in at 7:50 in the morning. I teach the one class till 8:40, and then I start this full-time job here. And Lincoln's one of my favorite characters in all of history. I would agree with Jonathan. We'd call him the GOAT, the greatest Gentile of all time. I think,
Let's see, they have new writers.
That's great.
Now that the strike's over.
And I always try to tell kids about the patent, and I use the word shoal, and their eyes glaze over. And you didn't use the word shoal, and that was smart on your end.
Took me a while. I always thought shoal, like svelte, were Yiddish words.
Right.
It turns out shoal is not a Yiddish word.
No.
So honestly, these guys, I sent them an email saying, if the MacArthur Foundation Genius Awards has not given you an award for this podcast, they really should. They were kind enough to contact me and say, would you like to be on the podcast? It is and I really mean this, it is such a blessing and a gift to be able to have them on our podcast, because they're the only podcast I ever listened to. And they really do have a genius for taking something that I have to say it's Lincoln-esque, to take something that people have strong opinions of. And they always start each podcast with one of them says, I love Hallmark Christmas movies. The other one says, I hate Hallmark Christmas movies. And the third one is, I could take or leave it.
Right.
And then they engage in, if I can say it, a platonic dialogue, really worthy of the classics, as to what is good and what is bad in the film. And they force themselves in, I don't know if they ever think about this, but they've done 1,000 episodes teaching us, if you listen, how to find common ground. Because they find things to like about movies they hate and hate things in movies they love. And by the end of each episode, and I can say this as someone who's been on the show a bunch of times, you end up just loving everybody who was on the episode, because you've come to some realization of things. Oh yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Or what's even better, the shock of recognition that the thing that troubled you about that movie, that line that was so stupid, they also thought was so stupid. And so you get to learn empathy.
Now, 1,000 episodes? I think of Hallmark movies, and every time I get offered one, or every time, I'm an actor, so it's like, I'm always like, this is as predictable as it can be. Like, they're all the same over and over and over again. Yeah. How do you find the difference in the episodes and make them interesting? I mean, I find that fascinating.
We've done 1,000 episodes. I think close to 700 are movies. So we've interviewed a lot of guests and stars. We do ranking episodes where we'll rank the whole list of the season or whatever. We also cover movies that aren't on Hallmark, Lifetime, Up TV, Netflix. Okay. But now it's become a brand. And so now we are doing a series right now on the Fast and Furious movies.
Oh, so love it. Oh, that's
every
great.
Every week you'll have a TV, like every week, like this week, there's 2 TV movies and an episode of When Calls the Heart, which airs on Hallmark. So we still are playing to our base, but on Friday we have a little fun, and we just recorded Fast 9. So we've just done the 9th. F9, the Fast saga. Excuse me.
But I think the interesting thing about covering Fast after covering so many Hallmark movies is they are very similar in that there's so much that you can pick apart, and that's part of the fun of it. So I think regardless of if you're making a movie for $2 million or $200 million, they can both be really dumb and also be a ton of fun if you kind of give yourself over to it.
Yeah, I love it.
And I'll say this job's a dream come true. Like, we love this job. It's amazing. The hardest part of my day is watching a made-for-TV Christmas movie. And I say that with all sincerity, however you'd like to take it. It really is the hardest part of the day. So life's pretty good.
That's great.
But that the genius of it, and the reason why I want them to be bigger and do more things is because they've done something that you're not supposed to be able to do anymore.
Yeah.
Which is become a 19th century literary critic. Right? Nobody asked them to do it. But there were guys with opinions who decided, hell, their opinions are as valid as anybody else's. What is Lincoln-esque about it is, and again, I just can't emphasize this enough, how many places in America do you see people say, I am going to take something on that I don't like and force myself to watch it, pay enough attention to it to come up with something good about it. This is genius, and I wasn't kidding about the MacArthur people. This is actually why I wrote the book, How to Be Abe Lincoln. Because at a time when we have tremendous divisions, we can't seem to agree that facts exist. Nobody apparently has an attention span. I just read that the current studies put the American attention span in 2003 was 2.5 minutes.
Can you repeat that question?
No, I can't.
I wasn't listening to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You fell asleep.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Your lunch is here. Hey, by the way, I just realized something. If you have to make yourself feel better by making fun of someone else,
Yeah.
that's an ugly thing to do.
It is. It is.
I don't do that. That's not how I roll.
That's not what you do. You know what? I'm going to read your book.
So I'm a big fan of these guys, and I thought when we do the Lincoln podcast, I want these guys on for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah.
One of which is they are Lincoln-esque in their ability to have opinions, share them in a way that is not divisive, so that even people who love Hallmark movies can enjoy this without feeling like they're making fun.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you guys is people have it's such a powerful audience. I mean, they're devotees. Like, they can't wait for the next one. And then as actors, there used to be a stigma attached to them. You were like, I'm not going to do a Hallmark. You do a Hallmark movie at the end of your career. Not true anymore. Absolutely not true. It's like there's such a massive audience. Do you guys find that you're preaching to the choir? Do you get hate texts, or the text? You get it, on social media. How do people come at you? And then or will people listen to the podcast? I mean, now you're so popular, but I'm saying at the beginning, was it like, how dare you? And then they would listen and go, this is kind of funny. And I do agree with this stuff. And it's okay to poke fun at your own, something that you love.
I think the answer is yes to all of that. I think, I'm still reeling a bit from Jonathan being so kind. Maybe we just had to be on his podcast for that to happen. And I do appreciate it.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But when is Abe Lincoln showing up? I was promised
here for
Abe Lincoln.
No, when we started, I think, our goal has always been to bring joy. And if Bran and I can hate, Bran and I are next door neighbors. We literally basically raise our families together. He's got 2 young boys. I have 2 young boys. There's a fence that separates our houses. And if he can actually love these movies and I can actually hate him and we can coexist and actually be best friends, I think there's help and there's hope for everyone. When we started, we still get messages like, Dan, you're really too mean, and that was hurtful and it was personal, and it's not, but for some people it is. And we get some that are like, take everything very seriously and want us to talk about the lighting and the cinematography. But what I found anyway was a lot of people watch them the way that Jonathan and his daughter were watching them, or the way that Bran watches them sometimes, and the way I now watch them. And so that's been the majority opinion is people are watching these movies because it's easy and it's comfort food and it's funny to laugh at how this movie was clearly made in a week with a $10 budget and some bubbles for snow. And so that's the majority. Do I get a couple of hate mail messages a month? Yeah, of course I do. And I'll entertain those. I have no problem going like, hey, we want to bring joy. I'm sorry we didn't do that for you. But also it's not personal. It never has been. But we get way more that isn't that than is that. Would be what I'd say.
Yeah, I just think, comparing it back to Lincoln, like, he had a big choir he was preaching to too, but he had so many people on the other side that he was trying to bring over. You've talked about that before.
So Lincoln is a great role model because he demands that we be empathetic and that we do it with kindness. And in my book, which you haven't read,
I've read 6 pages, okay?
I want to read the book so much. It's not out yet. You send me a copy, I'll read it.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's not on Audible, so what I'll do is I'll come and just sit in the back of your car and read it. As
That sounds like a plan.
You know what? You can sit in the front, and they'll be in the back.
So I in the book talk about the fact that 20 years after Lincoln died, there was a mathematician in Cambridge, Clifford, who came up with the Clifford principle. And the Clifford principle is something Lincoln would have absolutely agreed with, which is to believe in something that is not based on fact is a sin against humanity. And one of the things that I try to talk about in How to Be Abe Lincoln is to be Abe Lincoln is to live by facts and to know when to object when someone is not living by facts. One of the other qualities is to love, to be able to love something and someone in a mature way that takes account for all of our imperfections. Your podcast allows both to love something and to object to it. And there isn't a grading of the qualities. Lincoln's ability to love and his ability to object were of equal weight and value. And that's what they do on their podcast with these Vakakta silly movies. It isn't the movies. It isn't the material, right? The trick of their 1,000 episodes is it could be The Fast and the Furious. It could be a Hallmark movie.
Could it be Big Ass Spider? I'm just throwing that out there. But anyway, you look that up later.
Wild Wild West, maybe? Yeah.
Well, I'm more going down my IMDb list, but
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay, so this is about. I'm sorry, guys. This is about Greg.
No.
No. I get it.
They'll get around to Star Wars one of these days.
So one of the hard sells, and you know this as a history person, trying to teach people. You say Abe Lincoln, and people wonder about relevance and why it's timely. One of the ways he developed the reputation he had as a leader, and one of the reasons he was picked to be the leader of the soldiers that he led during the Black Hawk War, was because he was such a great wrestler.
Oh, he was a bare knuckle brawler, like a real wrestler.
I did not know that.
And he didn't lose. He did not lose. And so just keep in mind, we're talking about a president.
Bran, did you know that?
No, I mean, I know that about myself, but this is news to me about.
Do you know what?
Okay, good. I just need someone else on my side. I had no idea.
You know what's so great about having Bran on the podcast? It confirms what I've always suspected, which is he hates me. He hates me. So Dan said, hey man, we got to be on the podcast because and Bran said, I don't like that Jew. But here he is. And so what he's going to do is be on the podcast and say nothing. Right? He's just going to be a potted plant.
Just sit there.
Because if you watch their podcast, oh God, he's Jiminy Cricket. He just won't shut up.
Did you have our office mic?
Yeah, I don't know how you got that audio.
But like Lincoln, I'm going to forgive him because I know he's under a lot of stress. I don't know if you can see, he's a nervous eater, and he looks great now. But you see that picture of what looks like burl ives over his shoulder?
Yeah, is that
That's
him?
what he used to look like.
Ah, okay. So wait, he was a wrestler and a bare knuckle brawler coming up, like when he was a teenager?
I still am.
Not you. Not
Sorry.
Now he gets involved.
Exactly. No.
So Lincoln, in a violent age, growing up in a violent place, which was Indiana, by the way, not Illinois, and Kentucky, he made himself respected and well regarded through physical strength and through fighting people. He got clients that way. One of his most famous cases was representing the son of a guy he used to wrestle with, Armstrong. What's fascinating about this is Lincoln was 6'4" and 180 pounds. And people who saw him and slept with him, which is a different episode, said that he was a unbelievably beautiful physical specimen in terms of his body. Facially, everyone said he looked like a monkey and an ape. The reason why I think he would have loved UFC is he had the same love of that kind of physical battle and the same kind of attitude toward his opponents that UFC guys have. It's always a wonder to me how guys can spend, 5 minutes around just doing the most ungodly things to each other. And the minute the horn blows to end it,
they're best friends.
They're best friends and they hug each other.
Yeah.
And that too is another example of what we're missing in this country. And so the purpose of the book, in the same way that their podcast is to bring joy and to bring people together, the purpose of the book is to say to each of us, you can be Abe Lincoln. Here are the 7 things that Abe Lincoln did to be Abe Lincoln. He wasn't born with these things. Nobody told him these things. These are things he developed over the course of his lifetime. And if he can do it, not only can we do it, but if we want to be happy and if we want our country to survive, we have to do it. It's beyond a question of choice anymore. And that's the other reason I wrote the book, is at a time when the country is more divided and people seem to be angrier than they've ever been since the Civil War, Lincoln is the man of the moment.
Let me ask you, Dan, when you do present Abe Lincoln to your students, what's the reaction? I mean,
this is great. I'd not, all jokes aside, I would pay Jonathan Shapiro to lecture in my class. The cool thing about Lincoln, I always say that you can either argue that there are good presidents and bad presidents, or there are presidents who understood that they were fit for the time that they were in office. So you get a guy like Jefferson who has all of these very stringent Democratic, Republican, conservative ideas, and then he gets in office and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, let's double the size of the country. Yeah, let's have an embargo act. Yeah, let's big government here, there. And he's a great president. He understood what was needed. And Lincoln is the ultimate, to me, the ultimate example of that. He has to deal with radical Republicans like Thaddeus Stevens, who are like, if you don't preach equality before the law and for all things, you're not really doing the job of president of the Union. And then you've got the peace Democrats and McClellan and people who are like, peace at all costs. That's what's most important. And yeah, that's more divided than it was now. And I've not even mentioned the South. So like after the South was gone, the people that were left, Lincoln had to spin plates in a way, and everything Jonathan just so eloquently articulated, to create a world where everyone could feel as though they had skin in the game and that what they was most important to them mattered. And so the way I present Lincoln is a skilled politician who is incredibly gifted to the moment he was in, but also would 100% get his way. He would do it in such a great political way, such a great political fashion. He would run kind of legal circles around you. But the stuff that Jonathan's talking about, like all of that, I think he's 100% right. And I think showcasing a guy who is no president was more fit for the time that he was president than Abraham Lincoln. I think the best 5 presidents ever by most measures, Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Franklin Roosevelt, those 5 presidents were all, you could argue, fit and measured for the time they were in office. And so that's how I teach Lincoln, is a guy that when sectionalism's at its height, when debate is at its height, when the country looks like it's falling apart, we were fortunate enough to have the one guy who was most fit for that journey.
And then, but everything you described, I thought you were going to say, just like today. I mean, we are at a divide. People are so divided, and yet our core values are, love thy neighbor. You guys are neighbors, and if you didn't agree on a lot of things, one thing you love is your family and getting along with one another. But when you do present Lincoln to the students, that's the way you present them. How is Lincoln accepted? What do these kids think of Lincoln at first blush in the South?
Yeah, the first thing I do, I'm in the South. I'm in a school where a lot of kids are very conservative. Their parents have plenty of money. And the first thing I do is I draw the political spectrum on the board. So I'm like, this is conservative, and this is liberal, and this is moderate down the middle. And I ask them where they think Lincoln is on that spectrum.
Love
right?
that.
Like, where do you think he falls? Because one of the big misnomers of Lincoln is he was a Republican. He freed the slaves. Republicans are the party of Lincoln, and they freed the slaves. Well, Lincoln was a big government guy. Like he was a
Whig.
the railroad.
He was a Whig.
Yeah. He was originally a Whig before the Republicans came around in 1854, and so he was a liberal president, like he was. And so I think understanding that is not so I can get them in a courtroom and say, look, that you're wrong and your parents are wrong. That would be a disaster for me.
Yeah.
It's to say, hey, this guy was able to.
You do that later on in the year.
I do that later on in the year. Yeah. I do that when we get to the Warren Court and civil rights. But right now, I say, guys, this guy brought people together and is remembered fondly now. Like some of the politicians now that quote Lincoln and want to be aligned with Lincoln would have been willing to shoot him.
Yes.
In the 1860s.
And
so
yep.
I think that to me is what I want kids to understand is at a time of division, there was a president that was also divisive. Now, did he show empathy? Did he bring people to the table? Yes. Did he push footballs across the goal line? Absolutely. Did he do it better than anyone else could? You bet you. But make no mistake, like he drew lines in the sand. There were things, total war, like what Jonathan alluded to earlier with like, he was going to do whatever it took in the last 2 years of the Civil War to win. He did that. And then he turned around. He's like, let's heal, like bind up the nation's wounds, 10% plan, amnesty, all of these, let Robert E. Lee leave on his horse or, all of these great stories. And so understanding, I think sometimes we think we can be humble and meek and just fold, or we can be confident and strong and just, throw our money around and say that we're better than you. And the reality is that no, there's a combination of confidence and humility and compromise and stick-to-itiveness and steadfastness that I think Lincoln exemplified, that people haven't exemplified in political office at the office of the presidency for at least a decade now.
My two of my children are teachers, and we've talked about the fact that I couldn't be prouder of the fact that my kids became teachers. And I'm so proud that you're a teacher, Dan. Nobody wants to read a book that's going to teach them something. So I've tried to make the book entertaining. And there are over 60,000 books on Lincoln. We don't need a new one. The idea here was that nobody does a how-to, because what a stupid idea. But the more I got into it, the more I realized that Lincoln lived at a time where the American dream was kind of formed. America, as we know it as a great country, happened in his lifetime, and he was a central figure in it. And what made America great then was this notion that anybody can come from anywhere and make themselves into anything, right? Do you find your students have that sense of the nation?
I think that's a great question. I think the one thing that Gen Z has is more empathy. I think that they struggle to articulate what makes America different. It isn't freedom. It is that individual opportunity that you just talked about. But I think, Gen Z always wants to have the subtitles on Netflix, which drives me nuts, and I'm trying to forgive them for that.
What is going on with that? It drives me
absurd.
Why?
I use them.
Come on.
Why do you use them, Nick? Seriously, I need that because I have arguments with my boys about it, and they're like, "Well, the sound," because I'm hearing the background and the thing, so I change the settings, and it is so.
No.
It takes you out. And can you imagine sitting with a cinematographer and going, "No, I didn't do one." What are you talking about? Why do you do it?
Well, I don't do it. Gen Z does it.
No. I'm talking to Nick. Nick.
Oh.
Why do you? Because of Narcos?
I started because of Narcos, because half of the show is in Spanish. And so then I just left it on, and now I'm addicted to it.
Do you not know how to turn it off? And by the way, he's our producer. He's handling the board, just so we're clear.
Wow, I'm sorry.
I love re-recording engineers are terrible sometimes, and there will be scenes with really dynamic. You can't hear this, or someone,
It's just not the way the filmmaker intended.
We used to joke.
It's like, oh, I hope this gets on somebody's phone. Now we say that for real. We're like, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But that is such a thing.
Listen. I could talk all day about that. That is, I can't believe it, but Gen Z does have an empathy that I think will change the world. If you look at the Tennessee Three and those kids that are in the House of, or in the Senate or the Tennessee Representative Chamber, like walking out with all these students over gun violence, what Gen Z has that has evolved from Gen X through millennial, that Gen Z has more than anything is, I always tell kids in my class, sympathy is going, I've been there, I understand. Empathy is going, I don't know if I've been there, but I'm trying to see it and hear it your way.
Yes.
And Gen Z, for better or worse with the subtitles, they have that. And so
maybe it's because they have the subtitles. Have you thought about that? I'm just throwing it out there.
I agree with Greg. If you bring Hoyt von Hoytema in here or somebody and you're like, we're turning on subtitles for all your movies, they're going to shoot you in the face.
Yeah.
So,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think that there's something to that. And I think while they may not think of America as the land of opportunity, empathy will provide opportunity. I believe that. And so I encourage the kids in my class, and I teach one class. It's an entry exam to get in. It's the hardest class in the school. I teach 10 kids a year. It's great, right? It's like, but these 10, I encourage them, like, empathy will win the day. Kindness and love stem from empathy. And it will create opportunity. And I believe that. And I'm very encouraged by that with the kids that I teach.
I believe that too, but I believe for that to actually work, unfortunately, with the way that social media has been, and information and disinformation flies around so fast, that empathy is to control empathy around you, it's such a small bubble. Do you think that Lincoln today could have had the impact with all the way information gets out of hand? I mean, you're talking about all these virtues of Lincoln. If he were alive today, could he implement those virtues on the nation?
So I think about Lincoln in today, and one thing that's always struck me is Lincoln himself asked a doctor if the doctor had any medication that he could give Lincoln to deal with what we would now call depression. And I think if Lincoln were alive today, would he be on something? And if Lincoln,
like 2 Diet Cokes or something,
right? And if Lincoln were on something. By the way, if you would let me finish one sentence.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Even one.
The clock is ticking down. Again, if you're listening to the podcast, when Jonathan speaks, go to 2.3 and then go back to 1.0 when I talk.
So could Lincoln be Lincoln today?
Yeah.
I think Lincoln would have maybe welcomed the idea, for example, of being on antidepressants. And then you ask yourself, well, now, that would have maybe been of great help to him because he seemed to suffer from depression, but would that have taken something away from him, right? Or I think about the fact that Lincoln, in order to make money, agreed to become a surveyor and then realized he didn't know anything about surveying and bought a book about surveying, Grayson on Surveying, and over the course of 6 weeks taught himself surveying. And in the book, I give you a website to go to Grayson on Surveying. And I encourage you to try to answer one of the algebraic problems that Abe Lincoln had to figure out on his own after a full day of work on the farm by the light of the kitchen fire, and taught himself the geometry and algebra of surveying well enough that he can still be traced in Springfield for the surveying he did. There are 4 faces on Mount Rushmore. 3 of those people are surveyors.
Interesting.
Right? Jefferson, Washington, and Lincoln. Lincoln's the only one who taught it to himself. And so I think there are so many things that distract us that make life easier, but take something away from our ability to have sacred skills, like dealing with depression without medication, which I'm not advocating, or learning how to be a surveyor on your own.
Right.
That I wrote the book because I want people to go back to behaving the way Lincoln behaved. One of the things I talk about is to be Lincoln, you have to know how to navigate. Navigation is an elemental sacred skill that human beings have evolved to have to survive. thanks to GPS and the devices, none of us know how to read a map anymore.
Yeah.
And it's not just the mechanics of knowing how to get from here to there. There's a metaphor about being able to steer your own course. There's a reason why Abe Lincoln thought being a river pilot was the best training he ever had to be a human being. Guys, you haven't read the book, and I don't imagine you'll spend the dough to buy it, and I'm not sending you a free one. So let me just say, what I do in the book is I talk about the 7 attributes that made Abe Lincoln Abe Lincoln, and each attribute starts with a letter that spells out Lincoln, so you can't forget it. So the N is navigation.
Nice.
The L is laughter. You could write a book about Lincoln without jokes, but it would be a kind of a lie, right? The man... There are those who suspect he suffered from a low-level case of Tourette syndrome because of his inability to stop himself, a little like me, and not at all like Bran, stop himself from talking just because he doesn't like somebody. So the qualities that I think we all need to develop, a lot of them, in retrospect, I realize, a lot of them isn't just stuff that we decide to get better at. A lot of it has to do with what I think we need to reject. I think we have to stop relying on outside sources to tell us what the facts are. I think we have to find out the facts ourselves. I think we have to stop depending on others to navigate for us. I think we have to learn how to navigate again for ourselves.
Is it harder for a politician to be Lincoln-esque or to be Lincoln today because of the algorithm? Like, I am only presented shit that I agree with on social media. And I'm like, I have to seek out other opinions. I have to seek out that diner that I want to sit down and listen to other people that I don't agree with, but I want to hear what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think we've become baby chickens, and we think we have it so hard. I want to just remind everybody that when Lincoln was president, he was the most hated man in America. There was a whole half of the country who wanted to kill him, and were making some real efforts to do it. People were killing each other at a rate that's never been equaled. There was no modern media.
Right.
Even the media that supported Lincoln, like Horace Greeley's newspapers, gave him a hard time, right? So the guy's ability to message was really limited to his ability to say things that were so undeniably true and impactful that the truth, in a way, would set us free. Do I think we don't have Lincoln-esque politicians at the moment? I'd prefer to think that we have the opportunity to have a lot of Lincoln-esque politicians. What shocks me is they don't see the opportunity to be brave. They don't see how Lincoln's greatness was based on his ability to object to what was wrong in a way that was strong enough. I mean, we never had a commander-in-chief who was such a hands-on butcher. Because he couldn't find a leader until Grant, Lincoln was the commander-in-chief in every possible way. And he knowingly sent young men to die in huge numbers. Because he understood there are some things worth dying for. I believe that we have the capacity to be that way again because we were that way before. And Lincoln said that. Lincoln said, if someone has had a success, it ought to encourage us that we can have success too. So before we let you guys go or before Bran falls asleep, and by the way, it's not cheating to take anti-narcolepsy medication if you're on someone else's podcast.
You're allowed to. I just want to tap into what you just said. I think, back when Hallmark movies started, their intention was to make a good movie. I mean, that was the intention back then. So I think the opportunity is great for a filmmaker to go, you know what? They're going to give me an opportunity. I'm going to make the best damn Hallmark movie ever.
It's what you define
well,
as great.
you can kind of see in Hallmark movies that some actors like their eyes have glazed over.
Yes.
They're in their 35th one and it doesn't. But a lot
Name
of
them. Put them on blast.
I will
Name
not
them.
put them on blast. But a lot of it's kind of coming back around. Like last year and this year, they've injected a lot more like inclusion, and there are a lot of people you've not seen before on the network, and they're trying really hard. But the first 2 years we watched them, it did feel like the same movie virtually every time.
Yeah. I mean, and we're getting new stories too, and told different ways, which is just when you're watching 40 Christmas movies and one Hanukkah movie, over the course of 2 months, like the ones that stand out are the ones that are take the most risk and to have something to say that's outside of what the other 30 do. So I do think they're getting more exciting in that regard. Like they aren't all the same. A lot of them are the same, but they're not all the same.
Have they ever asked you guys to be in one of their movies? Have you ever been in one of their movies?
We have a good, solid relationship with Hallmark.
I know, but I would love to see you pop up in a cameo or something. It'd be great.
One of the actors had us on set to be extras, and we sat around all day in our extras outfits waiting for our scene, literally from sun up to sundown in Charleston, South Carolina.
On a ship.
On the ship, on the Yorktown. Yeah. We're on the ship, and we're sitting there ready to go.
COVID's running rampant.
We got face shields and masks on for 12 straight hours. And at the end of the day, we got one meal. They threw some Cheetos at us. and then at the end of the 12 hours, they went, guys, we didn't get to today. Can you come back tomorrow? We were like, this is a 3-hour drive, and we have actual work to do. No. So they paid us as background actors. We each made $100 that day.
Who's the actor? There's an actor that said, a famous actor, old-time actor that said, I get paid a lot of money to wait around the acting I do for free. Yeah. And it's so true.
John Wilkes Booth.
John Wilkes Booth.
And for you to say it now.
Yeah.
Before I let you guys go, give me just a quick thought as to what Lincoln means in the South now.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's great, and you're giving Bran a hard time, but this is a history. This
is
podcast.
Honestly the first I've heard of Lincoln. I'm learning so much today.
Yeah,
your barber is teaching you on Lincoln.
Yes, I'm learning a lot.
Lincoln is not beloved in the South. We are 150-ish years, removed from the Civil War. I can do math, and Lincoln is pretty hated, not by everyone. I mean, I think people that go and have an open mind, but I mean, you have generations of people. I mean, like one side of my dad's family, my dad's mom got remarried, and so these are my step aunts and uncles, so no blood relation, but I remember going to their house as a child, and you're going to love this, Jonathan. And you walked in, and this was right outside of Darlington, South Carolina, and there was an open living room, really nice, and there was a kitchen and everything, and there was a room in the middle that had no windows and was basically just a room in the middle. I don't know what else to call it. And it was all wood paneling, and in that room there was a bar in one side of the room with all this different kinds of liquor.
Amen.
And the only thing on the wall was a giant frame mural of Stonewall Jackson. That was it.
Wow.
That was the entire set deck for that.
What more do you need?
And so, which, amen. The oral traditions we tell. I mean, we have primary sources, but history's told. You print the legend, as the what is that? The man who shot Liberty Valance would say. But
which is in the book, by the way.
Yeah, there's an oral tradition that it supersedes a lot of history, and so I remember as a kid going into a barbecue restaurant in Columbia, and this guy who ran the barbecue restaurant had all these pamphlets out that you could take about the lost. It was a lost cause restaurant. Let's call it what it was. And one of them, I remember a picture of Abe Lincoln on it, and it's saying "Honest Abe wasn't so honest" underneath.
Wow.
It. So there's people who are rooted in the South and have generations of family that live here. Bran grew up in the South. His dad's from Maine, so Bran doesn't have.
And I grew up in Florida, which is confused.
And so
at least
the people that live here, that have lived here for multiple generations, have even kids I teach. If you teach one, they immediately will start to bristle at Lincoln. They don't know why. But they know that they don't like him because dad or granddad told him a story. And I mean, I taught a kid one time who had a belt buckle, and on the belt buckle was every state that seceded from the Union. And he was a super kind, tender-hearted dude who would tell you it took a long time for me to, just through teaching history, for him to go, God, maybe this is the wrong message.
That's a holy act, teaching something like that.
Yeah,
I found
fascinating.
But the Faulkner quote about the past isn't the past, right? It's because it's not over yet. It's still very much alive. You guys, thank you very much for taking the time. And if you don't listen to the Deck the Hallmark podcast, you're missing a treat. And I've talked seriously about it, but it really is for dummies.
Great.
Don't be intimidated by it.
Tomorrow. I'm going to start tomorrow. I want to be on your show.
Come on, man.
Listen,
Let's do it.
Can I be honest with you, Greg? I didn't know anything about it. Brandon's been doing all the work here. He just was like, we're recording with Shapiro at 2. Now it's 3. And I'm like, great, whatever. And I showed up and all I can see is your left shoulder. Your character actor, Greg Grunberg. Greg Grunberg, I know who you are. I watched Heroes, at least the first 2 seasons.
Oh, awesome.
I watched Alias. I think you showed up in The Boys, which is one of my favorite TV shows.
As myself, by the way.
Yeah. That's why I remembered it. Like, you're in some stuff, man. You're great.
Oh, thanks, man.
By the way, this is the kind
of
preparation that makes the Deck the Hallmark podcast so good.
Don't act like we got a lot of information ahead of time.
I
wasn't withholding anything.
Yeah.
Well, I have. You guys are at the top of his list, man. He loves you guys, and now I do too. I would love to be on your show if there's an opportunity.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys.
And thank you guys for wearing pants.
Yeah,
we do what we can. Yeah, and
look at these yams.
Hey, it's 85 degrees here, man. The humidity level's 1,000%. Like, we're doing the best.
Gotta give you a show.
Yeah. And in all honesty, Jonathan, if it wasn't 4:55 a.m. Pacific time, I would have already asked you to zoom in and lecture on Lincoln. But I feel like that's maybe I would never ever. I wouldn't do it myself. So, but I'm gonna buy the book and I'm gonna push it in class too, because I think there's some kids in my class who probably would really like it.
That's awesome.
Thanks, guys. Be well.
Yeah, man,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
The How to Be Abe Lincoln podcast is based on the book How to Be Abe Lincoln: 7 Steps to Leading a Legendary Life by Jonathan Shapiro. Out now everywhere. The podcast is produced and hosted by Jonathan Shapiro and Greg Grunberg. Music, editing, and producing by Nick Marzak. This has been another Motel Podcasts production.